Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Exploring the Edges. Today is Tuesday,
Yeah.
and normally we record on Mondays, but yesterday was the full moon in Scorpio, and we were deep in ceremony. And and yeah, we're not going to talk too much about that, but
No.
it does feel like now we're on the other side of this significant event that occurred for us in our stories. And yeah, we won't say too much, but it is
Yeah.
flavoring the conversation that we're going to have today.
Hmm.
And so now we can just jump right into it
Yeah.
and honor the energy that's alive because we did do our channeling and our pre-ritual, our pre-podcast ritual.
Hmm.
And the thing that came in really loud as we were sitting in it, the message that we want to share today. So I hope you guys are ready to just jump right in because we're ready. I'm more ready. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing that we are feeling into today is an edge because even as Jen and I were sitting and talking about this topic, it's one of those things that can be true on both things can be true.
At the same time.
Yes, at the
Yeah.
same time. And so we did weave into both of the aspects. And so we want to just hold that discussion now.
Hmm.
And the thing that we were talking about, we were thinking about how we can best serve others without sacrificing ourselves.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of different layers to this. And so I think how we'll jump into this is through storytelling,
Yeah.
is through telling a story about our own experience, our own ritual,
Hmm.
our own life ceremony, and
Yeah.
maybe,
One of.
yeah, one
One
of,
of.
this is true, one of our own life ceremonies.
Mm.
And then maybe we can step from there.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the the thing that I want to talk about, and we've talked about it many times on the podcast, but I sort of want to create space to really drop into it, to sink
Mm.
into it, to talk about the details in a way that is not rushed and it's very relaxed, and we can
Hmm.
really sink into the energetics of the ritual.
Hmm.
So I would like to just share how Jen and I share meals
Yeah.
because it is an important thing. I do think food, we won't go down this road too
Yeah.
far, but I do think food is a way that we show love to ourselves.
Yeah.
And taking the time to really carefully prepare meals that are satisfying and
Hmm.
nourishing, especially, we can really feel it when we're cooking for somebody else.
Oh yeah, it's huge. I feel like it's really difficult when you're cooking for yourself,
Mm,
especially, if you're tired. There were many times, um, there's many times where I'll make a one pot meal for us, but we still put it in bowls. So that is a part of it. But when it's just me, I'm just eating it out of the pot a lot of times because it's one more dish. It's like a whole other, and it's not. Sometimes you have to love yourself by keeping it simple, but sometimes, you're just taking the easy route.
I
You're not
have
giving yourself the love.
I have noticed that sometimes when you do prepare food for me,
Yeah.
even when you are doing two bowls side by
Yeah.
side, like you'll like carefully arrange, you like carefully arrange
Yeah.
the
And then I'm like,
carrots, and then you just throw the carrots into your bowl, or like you're like, delicately garnishing my bowl and like saucing it, and then like you haven't left any sauce for yourself, so you just like scrape it with your spatula like onto yours, just and so I do think it's an example of how how it's so much maybe more accessible to show that
Yeah.
care to others,
Yeah, for
right? And if we
sure.
want to do something special for somebody else, we might make them a beautiful meal.
Yeah.
But sort of forgetting that we have this really special ceremonious occasion 2 or 3 times a day, every day, to
Yeah.
really show that love to ourselves.
Yeah.
Anyway, we won't go too far down that
Yeah.
road, but
But it's a part of it, and there's many
mm,
times where I'll make a beautiful plate for myself, whether you're here or not,
mm,
even before I met you, but not always. It depends on how much juice you have.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
So, so when either one of us does cook, because I do sometimes cook, mostly
hmm
you cook, but sometimes I do cook. What we do is we always spread out our placemats on our counter. We eat at the counter, and so one of us will spread out the placemats. And we didn't always eat on placemats, but it feels special and it
Mm-hmm.
feels fancy and
Mm-hmm.
it sort of grounds the ceremony, right? So this is an element that is not significant, it's not expensive. It's just a placemat in a design that we both really appreciate aesthetically. We ground the ritual of eating with a placemat. And recently we've incorporated candles. Not recently, it's been a couple of months.
Yeah.
But we have incorporated beeswax candles in beautiful candle holders that Jen, you weren't using because they were too fancy, right?
Yeah, I had bought them years ago when I was still in university and I had a placement in Kenya and I was in Kenya and I bought these candle holders and they had never been used. It's one of those things, where you're saving it for a special occasion. You're saving your candle holders for a special occasion. You're saving this spice for a special occasion. You're saving whatever and recognizing that every occasion is just as special as you make it.
It's true.
Yeah.
And so we will light the candles. And then whoever has prepared the meal will hand the bowl to the person that's receiving the meal.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of presence, like the other person is present and they are
Mm.
receiving in gratitude this meal that's been prepared. And and so then we do our prayer. We
Yeah.
give gratitude for the meal. We ask for the blessing of the plants and we thank them for their sacrifice.
Mm.
And depending on what's alive in the energy, we might give energy to people in our lives, or we might give
Mm.
energy to each other or ourselves. And we're always asking for the food to be beautiful and
Yeah.
nourishing, and so we do have this full ritual around meal times. And we've said before that it started small with
Hmm.
just like a quick 1 minute thank you for this
Yeah.
presence, right? And it's evolved over time
Hmm.
and through our collaboration, through our co-creation into this long, not long, but
Yeah.
longer ritual, right? We
Yeah.
put the placemats out, we light the candles, we
Yeah.
prepare the food, we use the good stuff, the fancy
Yeah.
bowls, right? We use the fancy glasses.
Hmm.
We create the foundation for it to be special. It's a ritual, it's ceremony.
Hmm.
And so, it's a practice and
Yeah.
it's a commitment. It's a commitment to presence.
Yeah.
And so the thing that we were thinking about today is that oftentimes when we are with others, when we are with ourselves, it's very
Yeah.
easy for us to be part of that devotion, the
Hmm.
devotional practice of meals
Yeah.
with each other.
Yeah.
But when we are with others, sometimes it feels a bit strange to sink into that space.
Yeah. For an extended period of time, especially. We still, I think, always do,
Mm.
but it might go back to like the first time,
Yeah,
where it
the
just,
quickie.
yeah. And sometimes, I mean, sometimes I've gotten away with it even, before I met you, having like a big family meal.
Mm.
And everybody would be talking and I would just take my moment and nobody would even notice. So
Yeah, but I do think,
yeah.
we've talked about this before. Sometimes it can be uncomfortable to observe people
Hmm.
in devotional practice
Yeah,
because of those sometimes like traumatic religious undertones that we've experienced in our lives.
sure. And even if you don't even realize, I'm just thinking about it now, as one time at drum camp before my meal, I usually do this when I'm by myself, both hands, and give gratitude. And a friend of mine looked at me and she was like, "Are you okay?" Like she thought there was something wrong with me. She wasn't uncomfortable because she thought, yeah, I was praying or
She was
she had
about to
any.
Heimlich you.
Yeah, she just thought like I was like, maybe there's something wrong with my heart. Maybe I was like, couldn't breathe. So there's just even something like that brought it to my awareness. And I was like, yeah, yeah, I'm just giving gratitude to my meal before I eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then we did start to have this conversation, and this is where the conversation sort of
Mm-hmm.
unfolded. And
Mm-hmm.
so, on one hand, I was saying that it does feel appropriate to meet people where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So if I said, if we were having dinner with somebody who was not did not have a lot of openness to devotional prayer
Mm-hmm.
or gratitude or
Yeah.
mindfulness or presence, that that may be a way to invite some of that love, a way
Mm-hmm.
to speak in love, share love, energetically give love. is to meet that person somewhere in the middle.
Hmm.
So maybe instead of like a full 4 minute, I mean, sometimes we even cry sometimes,
Oh yeah.
depending on what's coming in. Like
Yeah.
some, sometimes the energy that we're in is so beautiful and there's so much grace. And
Hmm.
Jen and I are both such deep feelers sometimes. So I'm just saying, if we're with
Yeah.
somebody or if we're out at a
Some
restaurant,
people can't handle you crying,
that's true.
you know? So it's just this awareness.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
feeling into this, right? Like a full 5 minute crying gratitude practice and like, the place, it just sometimes it makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so I was saying that recognizing that sometimes people are not comfortable, maybe a way to show them love is to meet them in the middle.
Yeah.
And this doesn't just apply to food
Sure.
ritual, right? This
Sure. This
applies,
is just one example.
yeah. So we're sort of feeling into all of the ways in our lives that we might not bring our full self or our full truth into every situation.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
we're going to start it based on this food thing.
Yeah.
On one hand, meeting somebody in the middle. And on the other hand, there's this service to truth of self.
Yeah.
How do we serve others without sacrificing self?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that a bit more. But Jen, I think you, when we were talking, you had this really good example, this framework of feeling into it,
Hmm.
the ways that we temper our truth when we're in the world. And you had
Yeah.
mentioned like, having work clothes versus,
Versus other clothes. Yeah, and
yeah,
I feel like this is an example that many people, and sometimes you do have to have work clothes, work
yeah,
specific clothes. There's a dress
uniform.
code, there's a uniform, whatever. Sometimes you're not in a job where that exists, but I think there's just this like societal expectation for you to dress a certain way when you're at work. And I even remember like being in teachers college and having like full dress pants and button-up shirts, to go teach little kids who just touch you with sticky hands and you don't know why the hands are sticky,
Why are these
and
sticky?
you have like these clothes that are more difficult to wash and
Yeah.
they're like fancy and you feel
Mm,
like you're not, well, at least I felt like I wasn't like moving and being able to be my full self in the clothes
mm,
because the clothes were not me.
yeah.
And that was a long time ago.
And even sometimes it's not societal pressure. Sometimes it's
Sure.
our own
Oh,
pressure, right?
sure.
Like we believe like this is the way that a teacher dresses.
Yeah, and be professional and
Right.
be
Or this is the way that an executive dresses. Or
sure.
this is the way that somebody who is confident dresses.
Sure.
We have all these ideas around our appearance,
Yeah.
but
Or as being professional the way that you show up,
right.
not in what you're wearing, is being confident, shown in your own confidence. And when you're wearing clothes that you feel like yourself and you're going to be more confident. And it's just like one example that I think many people may be able to feel into for themselves of, like work clothes versus not work clothes,
Hmm.
work face versus not work face.
Or even if we were gonna go have a coffee with friends,
Hmm.
depending on who the friends are, we might choose different,
Sure.
we might present differently depending on which friend we're
Yeah.
we're having coffee with.
Yeah. And I feel like there's this importance in finding this balance between being authentically yourself and then again, maybe meeting people where they're at
Hmm.
or presenting in a certain way at work.
Hmm.
There's lots of people that just swear all the time, and that's who they are at their core. And maybe you can't do that when you're teaching little kids.
Yeah.
And I think that that's okay, but
Yeah, sure.
like showing up in your authenticity, I think is really important because it catches, right? It gives other people permission to be themselves.
Hmm.
I wear pants that like some people wouldn't wear to work, but other people are wearing like leggings and a long shirt.
Hmm.
So I guess it depends, but I feel like every time that you're more and more yourself, even if it is like a little bit like able to meet somebody where they're at,
Hmm.
you're giving them permission to be more themselves. If we would be in a situation where we're full on crying, we hold it back a little bit, you're still, because that person, we know that they don't have the capacity
Or that it's
or that
uncomfortable.
it's
Not that they
uncomfortable.
don't have
Yeah.
it, yeah, but just that it's that breaking point, the
Yeah, but
meeting the
like,
edge
but
and it's uncomfortable.
this discomfort is like too much,
Yeah.
like that's what I mean.
Mm.
And because somebody can be uncomfortable, but like still be able to like sit in it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people can't, depending on the situation. And so it feels like just like finding this balance where you can be like authentically you, but also be accessible. And I think even when we talk about the podcast, like when we sync in, we ask, like, please help us find like the words and the way to say it so that the people who need to hear the message can hear it, because you can say the same thing in so many different ways.
Mm.
And like sometimes it might feel too much, sometimes it might not, feel like enough. And it's finding this balance where it's the right amount, this wisdom to.
Yeah, and this is where I think then we can start to talk about the other side of that, which is sometimes when you are fully in your deep, authentic frequency,
Mm-hmm.
if someone were to witness us when we're fully tapped into that grace,
Mm-hmm.
we're crying and we're holding each other's hands and
Mm-hmm.
we're broadcasting that frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And so even when it's uncomfortable to behold, it's uncomfortable to witness, it's uncomfortable to receive it if you're not used to receiving that energy,
Yeah.
it's transformational.
Oh, sure.
And so Jen and I were talking about like what is the cost of not bringing yourself fully even when you know that you're not necessarily going to be met.
Yeah.
And so then we started to weave into this other thread, right? And I do think that it's important to speak about this as well.
Yeah.
So yesterday we were in ritual, we were in ceremony, and I was in a full grief process.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, wailing,
Yeah.
ugly crying, snot, heaving,
Mm-hmm.
and I had my feet in the river and I was fully in a grief process. And I became aware that I was being observed. Somebody was observing me.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I became aware that I was being observed, I shut it off,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I've been in many spaces on my journey, and whether we call it a healing journey or a spiritual journey or this journey of authentic truth,
Mm-hmm.
where many people did not feel comfortable expressing the depth and the fullness of their emotions.
Yeah.
I have been in spaces where deep grief was present, deep grief, ancestral grief, the grief of ages,
Mm-hmm.
deep grief. And people were just aware that how they might process it would be too much.
Yeah. And I feel like if you're holding this awareness of like what other people are going to think or how it's going to affect other people, then you're not able to process it yourself. And so it
Mm,
stays.
mm,
Even if you're, sorry,
yeah.
even if you're in an environment that is supportive of that process. Like
Mm,
in some of the retreat spaces you've been in, even for me in Women's Drum Camp,
mm,
like as a space holder in some of those moments, you can really hold space for the person who's on the floor feeling it all. But in that you can feel the people who are standing there like not knowing what to do with themselves because they're uncomfortable, feeling like maybe they can't leave. And it's just, I feel like it's always going to be there. Yeah. And it comes, sometimes you just have to let it go and be okay with it. And
but
know that the people could turn, that people could step away. They can do their own things. I don't know. Like, it's just
yeah,
interesting
you're not
because,
responsible for someone else's experiencing of your experience.
yeah. And it's just
Mm,
interesting to feel into like being in a retreat space or a space that is supportive to holding that kind of feeling,
mm-hmm.
like, and how the people in that space, even though that's why they're there, especially like if you're talking intuitive rebirth or something, right? Like that's why the people gathered and they're still holding back. Like this is how deep it goes
Oh,
for
yeah.
generations and generations, lifetimes, even just within our own society. We're just taught over and over and over, like don't express, don't express, don't be too
Yeah.
much joy, too much pain, too much whatever.
Yeah.
And
Sorry, can we just stay there for a minute?
yeah.
Because it is not always too much grief. It
Mm-hmm.
is not always too much anger.
Yeah.
It is not always too much volume.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's too giggly.
Oh, that's what I mean, like the
Sometimes
joy
it's,
and silliness.
yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes it's too relaxed.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's too at ease.
Mm-hmm.
There are both pieces where we could be too much of anything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. For somebody.
for somebody or even for ourselves
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah, even for ourselves.
Yeah.
Even in my process yesterday when I was fully in it, I still had this extra awareness of how my experience might affect somebody else. And it's the same as
Yeah.
being in a devotional ritual in the presence of somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
It's the
sure.
same thing. And so we did start to peel back these layers, explore the edge of
Yeah.
how do we serve without sacrificing ourselves?
Yeah.
And where is that edge and how do we do that?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that you talked about was just bringing awareness to, I think you had said if you run into somebody at the grocery store, like what happens
Yeah.
when there's multiple pieces of yourself at the same table?
Yeah. So
Mm.
I was kind of feeling into this, and I think that it's normal to, in the same way that we might have different clothing, to not have a different personality, but a different persona. Like maybe this person who swears a lot on the weekends, all of their friends are all the same, and then,
Mhm.
but they're not like this at work. And
Or you
people,
have festival clothes that you wouldn't
yeah,
necessarily
but
wear to
well, yeah,
church.
for whatever, right?
Yeah.
But people at work like didn't even know that you swore at all,
Yeah.
and then now you're at the grocery store and you meet two of these people at the same time.
Yeah.
Like
It's a
how do you
collision.
interact with them? Like what part of it is just you that can be in both places and hold both places, right?
Mm.
And I feel like there's like this balance because it's not always just work and not work, right? And I feel like there's so many people who are so exhausted all the time. Like how many masks are you wearing? That's just a question that I've been sitting in, like not even for myself, just a general question.
Yeah, and we can sink into that, but I was just thinking quickly before we do,
Hmm.
like even like sitting at a table with you
Yeah.
and like my sister, for example,
Yeah.
or my friend,
Yeah.
like even because even though the worlds aren't even really that much different, it does feel like,
Yeah.
this is where we can see like what kind of a how close to our core we are.
Yeah. And
And
even sometimes you're sitting at a table with people who talk about the same things, but then don't have the same kind of ritual.
mm,
Like with our meal ritual, we could be sitting at a table with somebody who talks about manifestation, who talks about presence, who talks about gratitude, who talks about all of this. And there's still a part that feels like
mm,
this too muchness to spend 5 minutes,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we're also being challenged because our experiencing of the world around us is a mirror.
Hmm.
And so where I might observe something in somebody else, what I'm really observing is the parts of myself that don't feel comfortable with that level of
Yeah.
devotion, and it's always it's always an opportunity to be curious. But as you were saying about this idea of being stretched thin,
Hmm.
like when we are running multiple programs at once,
Yeah, your
when
phone or
we're
your computer like can't cope, and neither can you. I
yeah,
feel
so
like that's
you're
a
like
part of.
somebody in your mom circle.
Yeah.
You're somebody else at your job. You're somebody else with that like woo-woo friend, right?
Yeah.
You're somebody else with a friend who maybe you've had for a long time and is not woo-woo,
Yeah.
right? You put on all of these different skins
Yeah.
and you're somebody else in all of those situations. It does take juice. It takes electricity. It takes energy
Yeah.
to run all of those programs at once.
Yeah, and I think more than we realize because on the top layer of that, it feels so much easier.
Yeah, so true,
But it
right?
takes so much more energy than just genuinely not caring. Like we were sitting with your sister and she had played this game with her friends of like, if you like, who would you be if you could be anybody when you grew up? And we were
Yeah.
like feeling into Aurora and how like
Oh
she's
yeah.
just 100% herself. She says exactly what's on her mind. She doesn't care what people think
Yeah.
at all, like genuinely, and not in an unloving way. Just like, this is me. This is me 100%,
Hmm.
and how freeing that would be and how much juice that we put into like
But how much harder it feels in the moment to just show up in your
100%.
festival clothes at church. It feels
100%.
really hard.
Sure, it feels so much harder, but I think that the level of juice because you only have to show up in your festival clothes once.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
then it's easy.
Yeah.
Whereas like you always have to show up in your church clothes
Mm,
every single time. And we're just
mm,
using church, like we don't go
yeah.
to like church, but every single time. And then you have to upkeep this. Whereas if you can push through
Mm.
and just be like, nah, this is me.
Yeah, that one time
That
initial.
one time that like feels like this versus feeling like this. But if you do this 1,000 times,
Yeah, and we had talked about
sorry for the people on Spotify, I'm doing little movements with my fingers, but yeah.
but we had talked about even how I forget what our example was, but we had talked about how it was similar to coming out. Do you remember what we were saying
Oh yeah,
about?
because we weren't talking about that just now.
No, but
Oh
like last week we were talking about how like saying something about yourself. I forget what we were
yeah.
saying about ourselves, but like telling people like, "Oh, I'm I don't know, an intuitive
Oh
energy."
yeah, that it felt like saying I'm gay or I'm
Yeah,
whatever.
or I'm
Yeah.
vegan.
Or I'm vegan. Oh
Or
yeah.
yeah, like or plant-based
Yeah.
or
Whatever label that you're gonna
highly
put on yourself.
sensitive, right? Like
Yeah.
when you're trying to share these parts of yourself, like,
Yeah.
the you're rationalizing like the reason why I was in such a big deep,
Yeah.
deep grief process, or the reason that I'm selective in
Yeah.
whatever the thing is,
Yeah.
right? Like you try to rationalize and share, and it feels like this big coming out process.
Yeah.
Similar to like sitting down and being like, Mom, I have a girlfriend. Feels
Yeah.
like this huge thing.
Yeah.
And then as soon as it's done, there's this freedom that comes in, like now you don't have to worry about someone finding out that you have a
Yeah.
girlfriend, or having to expose that piece of self and facing the judgment or the rejection or the criticism.
Yeah.
Exposing this piece of yourself and watching all of your friends freaking turn their backs on you because it's
Yeah.
too much, or
Yeah.
there we have these. I mean, it is part of our process in terms
Sure.
of like, I know people talk about the butterfly caterpillar cliche a lot,
Yeah.
but it is this process that now the butterfly cannot be friends with the caterpillars. It's just part of it's
Yeah.
part of the progression.
Yeah.
But you do only have to do it once.
Yeah.
Mm.
It just feels really big.
Oh
That
yeah.
one time you go to work and you're like, I don't want to wear these dress pants anymore. I want to wear the pants that I feel like me in.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, what are people going to say? And then you know what happens? Nobody says anything.
Yeah, it's true.
Where you go to church and you're like, I just want to wear this, or I don't want to like take my eyebrow piercing out or whatever for church. And you just wear it. And then it's over. Like, because I feel like sometimes people react. Sure, sometimes people react. But
Yeah, but
sometimes
oftentimes
you've
it's
built
so
it up
yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
It's like
I
that
think
time I said I talked to trees on Instagram, and I was like, this is gonna ruin me. My
yeah.
entire public persona is gonna be ruined. People are gonna like
Yeah.
the straight jacket's gonna come for me.
Sure.
Nobody even interacted with that video. Like
Yeah.
nobody even saw it, I don't think. And it was such a big thing. It was such a
Yeah.
big thing.
But then probably because of that video, this other woman shows up on your feed who talks to trees and they reach out and like touch her in the face. Yeah, I don't know who she is.
Yeah,
It's
but
like, cool.
just
Yeah, it's just
like you said, you do build it up in such a way
yeah.
that. But I think tying it back to this original
You
thread,
just have to be yourself.
tying it
Yeah.
back to the original thread, maybe both things are true. Maybe
Mhm.
there's a way for you to show up with an eyebrow piercing as a teacher,
Mhm.
and kids are like, "Oh, okay,
Yeah.
so I can be who I am even if I'm in
Yeah.
a teacher role." And you're giving that permission. You're giving the permission slip. You're visible. It's the
Yeah.
same thing almost with the queer community,
Yeah, it's visibility is so important. Then people go, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, or there's an expression of that as soon as people see it, they're like, nah, they
Mm.
turn away, right? There's no openness to allow that exchange
Yeah.
of. And so I do think, like, you always talk about balance.
Mhm.
It's one of the beautiful things that you carry in your medicine as
Mhm.
an earth keeper. But on my side, I'm all about fuck the balance, right?
Yeah.
Like fuck the balance, like, and I
Yeah.
and I do think that there's a sacrifice on either side.
Yeah, of course there is.
And so whereas you're like, okay, I want to find the balance in sacrificing self for others and sacrificing others for self, I really struggle with that because it's something that my constitution is not finding the balance.
Mhm.
It's all about, for me, I feel like there's been many times in my life where I could face an entire stadium of people who were disgusted. And if I knew in my whole core, my whole column, that the message that I shared in that moment was for the highest good, I would do it every single time,
Yeah.
And so this is what we're sitting in. Like, maybe the next time we are at a table, maybe we should cry for 5 minutes. I don't
Yeah.
know, because
Yeah.
this is the thing. And so this is the edge. This is
Yeah.
the edge that we're exploring.
Yeah, and I think some of the balance that I sit in is being in the stadium, and if the message is this, like how can I present it in a way that is
Yeah, able to be received,
able to be received,
shared with love.
where you're like, this is the message coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been always a challenge my
Yeah.
entire life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think
And I
that,
don't think that there's a good or a bad or a right or a wrong,
well, I
you
am
know?
working more towards this. This is wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
This is the embodiment part, right? And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people talk about embodiment without really a felt sense of what it means to embody.
Mm-hmm.
But this is this is that part about bringing bringing your lived experience,
Mm-hmm.
bringing your past,
Mm-hmm.
bringing even the things that you've walked away from,
Yeah.
bringing even the people that have rejected you,
Mm-hmm.
bringing all of that into this stew, right? That you're gonna create going forward.
Yeah.
And I think with the embodiment piece, it's wisdom, right? And so we can feel into this, even the idea of having this conversation. Well, how much
Yeah.
is a sacrifice and what's appropriate for me and how and what do I feel like is the best way for me to share love?
Yeah.
That's an embodied wisdom.
Yeah.
And especially when you start to take a step back and say, okay, like, am I six different people in my life?
Yeah.
Am I running six different programs?
Mm-hmm.
What are the ideas, the structures that I've built around how I need to show up?
Yeah.
Do I temper myself? Am I too much?
Mm-hmm.
Am I sharing myself enough to meet the people that could benefit from that love?
Yeah.
Am I showing enough of myself to find the people that can fully hold it, that I
Yeah.
don't have to temper myself around, that can fully be
Mm-hmm.
in it, that can witness me in my fullness.
Mm-hmm.
It's how we decide to engage with the world.
Yeah.
And so I think even having that conversation is wisdom, like
Yeah.
how can I share love in a way that it can be received
Yeah.
without sacrificing myself.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I do feel like it changes over time.
Mm.
Like I feel like you can have wisdom if wisdom is like the culmination of your knowledge and experience and how to do it, you can have it. And then there can be a lesson. And we won't get into it, but yesterday there was a big lesson for us on where we were, like we had a lot and we were very intentional, but we had a big lesson.
Yeah.
And now there's like a whole new
Awareness.
awareness and process and talking about this stew that you were talking about with all of these aspects. I kept thinking like not like a pot of stew on the stove that you would like consume
Yeah.
and have it be a part of you, but like as like the pensieve where you can like look at it all and have it all laid out and be
Mm.
like, oh, okay, like this is how this connects to this, and you can kind of see it all.
Yeah.
And and to have these experiences and not have an attachment to them. Like when you eat the stew, it's like a part of you and it's attached to you.
Mm.
You can look at them and you don't like forget about them, but you can look at them and have them for information, and how to navigate different situations and where to draw your knowledge and wisdom from. I don't know, it just feels like it's kind of like laid out in front of you, like every experience you have, every choice that you make. And in finding your people, when you're talking about like how much of yourself you can show for to find the people that can truly hold you, there's like a point where like if you can't show the minimum to not be hurting yourself,
Mm.
then sometimes you have to let go, and sometimes that's super painful and super difficult. But there has to be like a boundary. There has to be a boundary where you're like, if I shrivel more than this point, it hurts me.
Mm.
Like I feel like that line also is something that can move, and maybe it will move over time, but that it's almost easier. Sometimes you'll find, I think, the people that are already in your life can hold all of you and you didn't give them the opportunity.
Mm.
But sometimes I think it's the new people who maybe you don't give them the opportunity to not hold you because you're like, okay, you're new. So anybody new coming into my life, like this is me, take it or leave it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, as you were speaking into
Yeah.
all of that, I was thinking about the radical pleasure,
Mm.
liberation. The first time you don't wear a bra into the grocery store, right?
Yeah.
You're like, fuck it, I'm not
Yeah.
doing it anymore. The first time You know, the first time you don't do whatever that
Yeah.
has been a pain in your soul.
Yeah.
Right? You're doing this. Every time you do it, it hurts. You're like,
Yeah.
this isn't me. This sucks. Every
Mhm.
time you're aware of it. Maybe it's every time you have a conversation with somebody that you know should not be in your life.
Yeah.
Maybe it's every time you go to that job and you're like, every morning I sit in my car, it freaking sucks.
Yeah.
Right? It's a pain every single time.
Yeah.
As soon as you set it down, that radical pleasure that
Yeah.
comes from choosing self.
Yeah.
And so this is the edge. And we
Yeah.
haven't given any practical advice. We've just explored a topic.
Yeah.
But it is the edge. And it's something that we're all finding over time it changes.
Yes.
Over time it deepens. We're integrating lessons from our life. We're
Yeah.
embodying wisdom.
Mhm.
We're walking out into the world in a way that feels like we love ourselves.
Mhm.
And we can also reach others.
Yeah.
And it's an edge.
Yeah, and I think that's an edge that always is changing, like you say, and I think like the only kind of quote unquote practical advice would be to try and bring awareness to it and find that edge, that boundary where does it start to hurt you? Because I think it's really easy to like move through and be and you know, it's just easier to be this way around this person and like not bring the awareness to it's hurting me because the ease kind of overrides the hurt.
Or it's hurting them.
Yeah.
Because the medicine that you have serves them in a way that you're not even aware of.
Yeah, I think sometimes you have to walk away, and I think sometimes they have to walk away. But they cannot, so you have to walk away.
Yeah, and even if we take it away from like people as a, you know, sometimes it's like a, you know, like many times in my life, I've found myself being like the outsider.
Yeah.
Right? And what you're doing is being observed on the outside. And sometimes people on the inside are like,
Yeah.
I actually do fucking like that shirt.
Yeah.
Or, wow, like, you know, many times I've found myself.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you're a bridge you don't even know.
Yeah. Yeah, but you can't be a bridge if you're not yourself.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
That's the show.
Hoo-wee.
Yeah, but these are deep energetics and we can talk on the surface, but these are transformational practices.
Sure.
And especially these are profound times that we're moving through, times of big change. At the end of this month, Saturn is moving into Aries out of Pisces.
Yeah, so for like 2.5, 3 years. So
yeah, so if you're an astrology person, we can feel into how this Daddy Saturn, the teacher, how the teacher has been teaching in this really connected, almost ascended spiritual sign of Pisces, this boundaryless sort of collective. And we're moving out of that straight into the fire of Aries, which is all about self, right?
Yeah.
And so moving, you know, this Sabrina Lynn from Rewilding talks about the spiritual warrior. So moving all of this, right? And so this is when we are going to be on the outside and we're going to be like, yeah, fucking look at me.
Yeah.
You know? Or there's has to be this integration of what is the best way for me to share love.
Yeah.
Right? And what does that look like?
Yeah.
So just something to think about moving forward.
Sure. Yeah.
We'll be back next week with I don't
know what. We'll find out.
Yeah, I don't know what. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thanks, everybody. Oh, we appreciate you so much.
Yeah, feeling into this space where how can we honor ourselves while still loving others?
Yeah. It's all love.
Big stuff. Thanks, Scorpio full moon.
Yeah, Scorpio.
We'll talk to you guys next week.
Yeah, have a great week, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.